Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. And from wherever you're watching us from, whether it's from our main LATOKEN page or live on YouTube itself, remember, click and subscribe, get the schedules down, and put in a note depending on the topics that you'd like to kind of look on. This is VCTV, and my name is Terrence, and welcome to one of our LATOKEN events that we have almost on a weekly basis now. Again, depending on where you're joining us from, today on the panel, we have four very prominent VCs out there who are leading their fields, and I'll let them kind of introduce themselves right now. So let's start with you then, John. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you're representing at the moment.
Yeah, hello, Terrence and everyone out there. This is John Lee. I'm saying hello from Seoul, South Korea. I am one of the venture capitalists specialized in digital contents, including the game and Korean commercial movies, the VFX, and etc. This is really good to meet you, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, John, and welcome on the panel. Karthik, off to you next.
Thank you so much, Terence. It's actually a pleasure being here. It's almost the 9th or the 10th time that I'm on the panel, and it only gets better with the participants coming around. I represent multiple businesses. I represent a large retail business, and I represent an investment advisory, and I also represent a panelist, a group of venture funds who actively involved in investing in early stage and late stage, both in terms of gaming, in terms of health tech, in terms of fintech, and in terms of edutech. So my primary interest in this space is to help evaluate certain early stage gaming and content creation startups.
Got it. Thanks for that, Karthik, and welcome on board. Sergey, off to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm managing partner of Morphosis Capital Partners. We're a boutique venture capital investments and fundraising consultancy company with offices in Singapore, Bangkok, and Hong Kong. We also have a partner company named Morphosis, which does helps startups scale up in Southeast Asia with a proper technical review and bringing them a new clients. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Francis, over to you, Francis. I understand you're coming to us from the Philippines. Tell us a bit yourself.
Sure, Terrence. So hi, everyone. I'm Francis. I'm a tech entrepreneur here for the last 15 years. I've also done my fair share of the VC side, having invested in a few companies over the last 6 years, particularly early stage companies here in the Philippines. I've also been a venture partner of Unifier Ventures, a Berlin and Manila-based fund, where we invest in people and HR tech. And I also represent quite a few organizations, but mainly on tech and M&A and investments.
Great. Thank you. Again, gentlemen, welcome on board. Thank you for being here on the panel and spending time. Today, we're going to talk a little bit on gaming, entertainment, social media. Now, these are not just words that we have at the moment. This is a big industry on its own. It started off probably as a hobby. Now it's a boardroom discussion, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me here. But let's start it off at the moment with the rise of the gaming industry itself. Now, it's becoming a major entertainment media channel, and that's roping lots of businesses in as well. So I think it's best that we start off to kind of look at the ecosystem and where are the boundaries at the moment when it comes to the topic itself. Perhaps, John, you can start us off with this one.
Okay, let's talk about the entertainment. As every one of you know, the BTS is actually swapping the world at this time, and also Blackpink is good. But what I want to say is, as for now, the Korean content is really good at this moment, but we have to look it up, the past, like the Japanese culture. When I was young, when I was 15 or 16 years old, I was listening to J-pop all the time, and then also collecting Japanese animation, and I was so deep into it. But this time, I don't want to talk about the Japanese culture this time. So I have no idea what's next. Maybe Philippines or Vietnam. Next culture is always welcoming for the world people, but it's for sure the Korean content is the number one this time. So I'm aggressively looking for the opportunity to make an investment in Korea entertainment companies. And there are many small companies getting bigger this time because the market is wider and they have a solid plan to expand their business to the global. So this is a really good circumstances to make an investment in Korea. So there are a lot of inquiries actually coming to me. So if you guys have any interest in Korean entertainment company, please feel free to let me know. I'm not selling myself, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't agree more. BTS and Blackpink, it's playing everywhere and everywhere that you hear and see at the moment. Karthik, over to you. Perhaps you can kind of give us an introduction to the industry itself and what's
So
it entailing at the moment.
if we were to go back into the history and see where the industry was around 4 years ago and where it is, one of the biggest and the most startling change has been, as of now, we've got around $4.5 billion at stake in terms of venture capital investments in the sector. Investments have grown from 34, 35 investments all the way in 2016, 17 to more than 300 investments at the moment and growing every day. In terms of viewership or in terms of sheer participation, 2018 is when esports overtook Super Bowl, and today esports ranks 14 to 16x of what Super Bowl participation has been in terms of viewership, in terms of air content viewed. We're talking about a whopping what Twitch and YouTube and even Greyhound recommended is 640 billion minutes of general video or gaming video content has been viewed in 2018, 2019. And with
Mm,
pandemic, we still haven't been able to come up with the kind of numbers we're expecting, but I expect it to be a little more than a trillion and a half. Even in terms of participation, what in 2016, 17, we were talking about 2 to 3 superheroes. Today, we are talking about almost 200 plus superheroes with all the leading gaming or all the leading sports fraternities, be it the Formula One, be it the PGA, be it the EPL, or be it even the NBA or the Boxing Federation, or even cricket or tennis, you name it. All of them have moved into the esports industry along with the arcade gaming and the racing and the first person gaming industry. A larger and more interesting statistics is celebrity endorsements in terms of Will Smith endorsing or a couple of the royal family of Saudi endorsing certain gaming platforms. The gaming industry has grown multifold, and which is where you see 2020, 2021, the revenue stream has been broken down not only from in terms of the gaming industry or the pure subscription, but also from a lot of network driven revenue, from advertising revenue, from franchising revenue, from participating and sponsorship revenue. So, what was a hobby has now almost become a thriving ecosystem, which is parallel to the sports ecosystem. And by 2025, it might just win. The highest prize money that any sports today offers is around a $9 million game, $9 million award, which is in the esports category, compared to a three and a half million that a physical sports offered to a winner. So that's where the industry is moving. I think it is a sunrise industry to start with. And with
mm,
content creation only becoming easier and entertainment moving from conventional entertainment into snackable and moving from static into participative or convergent entertainment, I think there's a lot for all of us. And especially people like me who are on the cusp of moving from A category to B, there's a lot to be interested in. So yeah, I continue to be an interested party.
great. Thanks for the introduction. I think we would agree that the prize money is getting quite lucrative as well. Francis, on your side, how would you look at the industry on the overall?
Sure, I think Philippines is one of the unique countries where we are very socially active. If not, if you look at Facebook, we're one of the most active users in the world. Given our 109 million people, but we're one of the top users of Facebook. And then when we're looking at esports, what's very interesting is esports is dominating our country very much so, to the point where one of my companies that do Wi-Fi in low income communities, 60% of our traffic is in esports, particularly Mobile Legend, which
Mm,
is dominating the youth. And if you could imagine, perhaps today where there are basketball courts in the streets, nowadays the basketball courts are not being used. People are sitting down on the benches playing Mobile Legends 5-on-5, and no one's playing basketball anymore, unfortunately.
okay, okay. Yeah, I think we all do see that transition as well. Sergey, do you think the industry is widening its focus here? Could you give us an outline on what you see?
Well, I'd say probably yes and no. So, what we've seen, and that was a positive effect, right, of the pandemic and everything, that gaming companies doubled their revenues, and there was a huge spike, in spendings on gaming among the consumers, simply because there was nothing else to do, right? They were locked in their apartments. What we've seen, there is one trend. For example, we have a company called Ampverse. They are a very successful esports gaming company, and they slowly transitioned more into being a media company with not just esports but gaming, which is widening the scope. I'm not saying that esports itself is not enough profitable. But if you look just at esports as a smaller angle, then you can see it's harder to evaluate the companies outside the US, because the companies in the US, they enjoy quite high valuation in esports. But if we look, for example, in Southeast Asia, the valuations are like 10 times lower. So in order to get a better valuation, you need to show, bigger scope, or what Francis told, and it's absolutely right. The Southeast Asia, not just Philippines, right? Thailand is a very, very active gaming country. I mean, the involvement in gaming is enormous. But we all need to remember that the gaming is really different between East and West. So for every, there are some exceptions, but for every Eastern gaming company, there are only a few that are successful in the West, and vice versa, simply because Western gamers prefer more PC, let's say PC gaming, and Eastern gamers prefer mobile and console gaming. And for example, in Thailand, it's mostly mobile. Even consoles are not that great, doing great. And for example, in Thailand, Korean and Japanese games are more successful, way more successful than, let's say, Western examples. So if we look at the whole industry and where it is moving, I think that currently there are a lot of money in the ecosystem. But I think there are not enough early stage investments, and let's see how it will change in the upcoming years.
Right, right. I think you're right. I think pivoting straight into that as well, let's talk a little bit about investments. Now, those on the panel today, of course, you represent a fund, you come from that VC background, and you wear that hat. Now, let's talk a little bit on investments. Where are you putting your attention to? And is it just in money at this time? Tell us, John, what do you think about that?
Yeah, actually, it's like expected revenue is the most important thing that we have to consider when we are reviewing the deals. But especially in the games, the investment circumstances, one new case is just coming out a week ago. It was so surprising. The name of the company is NPixel. NPixel is established by former programmers of the name Marvel. They were made the game named Seven Knights, and the mobile game made $500 million US for 3 years of the service. They come out and making a new company, and they raised more than 60 million US dollars for the Series A, and company value is already 400 million US dollars. This is a super deal and mega deal, and cannot be existed, cannot be taken in the future. So I was worrying about this kind of mega deal because they didn't even have any new games yet. They don't have a game yet, but venture capitalists put their tons of money for the company at once. This is a big problem because if this company is failed, there will be huge effect for the game industry investment too. So that thing is happening. Rich guys get richer and poor guys are the poorer. That things are also happening in the game industry investment in Korea.
Okay. Riding off on that, Karthik, what do you think? Do you share the same sentiments? Where and at what stage are the investments coming in?
So, to understand this, one needs to understand a little bit more about the stages of investments and where the money goes. It take a couple of minutes for me to give you a breakdown.
Sure.
For a regular investor who has been in the investment stage and who's used to investing 500,000, 500,000 to 700,000 on seed and angel and looking at growing it to a couple of million by stage B, is not typically a appropriate partner for a business like this, because what starts as a concept, a proof of concept, a blueprint, a wireframe at a couple of million in angel typically goes to around 35 to 40 million by the time it reaches a stage B. And by the time it reaches a stage C or a third round funding, for it to be commercialized, it requires typically 75 to $100 million in terms of funding. So there have been a lot of investments. And if you see, investments typically have come in either from existing entertainment partners or large scale business houses like Tencent bought Supercell recently. WG has invested in with Will Smith on a particular gaming platform. Hero has invested about 35 to 40 million into esports businesses. I just recently got a note about Redbird that invested around 135 in one stage and 230 in another to get into one team. All of them look at, and including us, all of them look at three levels of business. One, is the game or is an entertainment or is the proposition whole scale or holistic? Does it only bring in revenue through the subscription route, through participation route, through purchases route, or is it also going to bring in revenue through the network operator route, through the sponsor and advertiser route, through the franchisee route? Does it bring in revenue in terms of layers of participation? So the way we look at it in terms of evaluating businesses is, let's say if a game comes in with 14 levels, 16 levels, 18 levels, where does the game or where does the platform reach maturity? If the platform reaches maturity with users or participants not even going beyond stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 of the gaming platform, that means the game is not bringing in repeats, and hence it is not likely to succeed in terms of even advertising revenue or in terms of network proportions or even in terms of franchising and merchandising revenue. And hence, most of the gaming businesses led by investors are trying to make it very easy for the game to scale up to level 10, level 12, level 13 before it starts getting into a maturity stage. So evaluation of investments in this space primarily has been about how unique the game has been. Is the game into a slightly differentiated space? Is it multiplayer? If it is multiplayer, is it very high on network and bandwidth? If it is high on network and bandwidth, is it scalable in terms of its advertising and franchising revenue or its sponsorship revenue? If all of this works and if all the boxes are ticked, it is easy for them to get investments at least up to a stage C, which is where it starts getting commercialized. So yeah, we've been involved in a couple of such investments where I have a few NDAs in this, but we have an Indian gaming platform which is just about raised around 28 million. We have a Saudi-based gaming platform which has raised about 40 billion dirhams, which is roughly around $15 million. So yeah, there's sizable investment going in this.
Yeah, it's great. It's great that the VCs are still looking at it, and the whole investments are still fluid at the moment. At least that's what we see. Francis,
It's
over
very
to
fluid,
you.
especially
Yeah.
please. It's
No,
very
no, no.
fluid for Southeast Asia. It's very fluid for Southeast Asia for two reasons. One is the mobile penetration and the data or content consumption in Southeast Asia is significantly higher in this part of the world. North American media consumption, Western Europe media consumption, Latin American media consumption is primarily towards viewable content and non-participative content compared to a lot of participative and interactive content, which is where Southeast Asia, primarily Korea, Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan, and Japan, score significantly higher. So we see a lot of investments coming in through there and going into those markets as well.
Great. Francis, writing on that point itself, Francis, talk to us a bit about the investments that you see happening within the industry.
Sure. So in terms of esports, when you look at the regional aspect of it, there's quite a few esports companies that have sprouted up. And what's great is that all these guys have garnered really good traction over the past years. They were able to gather humongous numbers that, if you compare to their Western counterparts, are almost equally huge. But as Sergey said earlier, the issue is the valuations. Southeast Asia has a lower in-app purchase rate, so monetization is still a huge issue. Hence, the valuations are still far off from the US or European counterparts. That said, there's a lot of interest, though, in this space. I think brands are now becoming more open. So commercially and revenue-wise, there's a lot of revenues entering the esports, influencer, and KOL space. And there's a lot of interest right now, especially now that COVID is hit, for companies to sponsor events that are happening online, as opposed to before, where they used to traditionally spend most of their budgets towards physical events.
Right. Yep, we do see growth there as well. Sergey, how about on your side? What's your thoughts on this when it comes to the VCs, that early and late stage capital? Can you take us through a little bit on how you see it?
Yeah, sure. I wanted to add to what Francis said. Absolutely right. I mean, if you have the same platform, the same game with that have the same amount of users in the US and let's say Indonesia, the valuations, like I said, it may differ 10 times simply because the spendings of these people differentiate for the same amount. And for example, engagement in YouTube, and if we speak about esports. Of course, there is Twitch and other platforms where people look at this, but there is also tons of content where gaming players put their Let's Play videos on YouTube. And engagement, for example, on YouTube for Thailand, I think Thailand ranks about 5th in the world in terms of YouTube engagement. And there are enormous amount of videos that people look throughout the day. I mean, one person, how many videos that look through? But still, there is a lot of engagement, but it needs to take time for these users to be evaluated the same as very well established markets, let's say Australia, simply because of their pricing in terms of e-commercial purchases and in terms of their spendings on e-commerce and other areas. So if we look, that was absolutely right what Kartik and John said. The fact that the game itself requires enormous amount of development and a lot amount of money. So you cannot invest just, seed stage or early stage investments like $200,000, $500,000 and let them and see them completing the game and do the marketing. It won't work. So the games require way more investment money on early stage than they're, in other industries. Think of it as think of it as a high quality TV series, or even not that pretentious blockbuster into Hollywood, or that want to compete with Hollywood. They have ambitions. And if you look the TV series, well, at least you need to spend 300,000 on the one series for it to be good. So there is a certain price tag. And for the game development, if someone approaches you as a VC and says, "Oh, we have this beautiful game, we need this $200,000 and we're done," we don't believe it, simply because they don't have enough money to advertise it. They don't have enough money to make it high quality. And what's more important with the games, you're not just developing them. You need to support them every week. You need to put new updates, new items, new upgrades, something for people to be entertained. So if that's where your money have ended the moment they release the game, they still need a lot of money to advertise it, to attract customers, and it's a never-ending journey, because all these companies you see at the top of the app stores, they're pouring millions of dollars every month just to stay at the top, because people install the game, play it, uninstall it, and then they return again, probably after a couple of months. But to return, to hook them back, they need to spend advertising money again. So it's never-ending process, and no way a small startup company with a limited amount of funding have a chance to do that quickly. So if we also add about, I said, so that's the reason for the early stage investments. That's why we'll look mostly at the companies that are in the gaming sphere, but they do something more, something else than developing the game. It's not our forte, because if you invest in just developing of the games, it's a different beast. VCs usually that do that, they are deeply into just gaming. They're involved with gaming publishers, so it's a different game. It's not just a startup game. No one wants to invest $10 million just right away and see if it works, maybe, right? So yes, the world is mesmerized by huge numbers, huge revenue numbers. For example, the game Genshin Impact, it was very huge success in October. It was just released for the, especially for, it was a revelation for the Western gamers, because it's actually a Chinese game. But well, for just October, they earned $245 million. They already, got back their investments, but that's just one game. So don't judge the whole market by just one success. It was the same with the PC games. It was a long time ago. 15 years ago, it was the same with World of Warcraft, when the world was mesmerized by its success and thought that every mobile multiplayer online game should be a success, and they were not, actually. So with the early stage investments, we'll look mostly, if it's a gaming sphere, we'll look for the companies that do something other than game development, that have, and it shouldn't be a platform that copycats Steam or anything else. But there are solutions, for gaming companies. There are solutions for gamers, and then it's a different play, right? So then it have a potential for higher valuation. That's what I think.
Right. I think we would all agree with you there as well, Sergey. And again, to those viewing in from wherever you are, remember, we have a series of shows coming up. So do look at our schedules. We have all the VCs on board, ready to take your questions and ready to listen to you as well. So do approach us if you need that direct approach to all of them as well. And again, just to kind of continue on that point there, gentlemen of the panel, the people watching you at the moment, most of them are startups. Most of them are probably within the industry itself. I think it's only fair to kind of highlight a little best practice, a little what you consider to be something that you would look at just by wearing that VC hat. So perhaps, John, you can tell us a bit, or even highlight a few progressive projects that you see at the moment.
Okay, let me tell something about the kind of characteristic of the Korean venture capitalist. We don't like risk like other venture capitalists. Why not? However, in my perspective view, I want a small win rather than big dream. I mean, whenever the startups comes to me and pitching their business model, if the business model makes sense, and if they can make any dime or penny by their designed business model, I like it. But if somebody else coming and talk to me like I'm going to selling the ticket to the moon and it will be more than $1 million US per ticket, I don't believe it. So whenever the startups preparing their business model, it should be make sense, and you have to launch it yourself. And even if the amount of money is small, but you have to make it before come to the venture capitalist, then that will be very helpful for me to believe it. And also team structure is very important. The IT companies and also game companies are coming to me with the programmers only. But what I want is what kind of business model and expandability and also a kind of the solid plan to go to the world. The global business is harder and harder. So whenever you guys are startups and making product is prominently important, but also think about the business guy inside of your team who can guide you to the world and saving your world, and also make also suit investment from the global venture capitalists. That's also important part for me to make a decision.
Right. Thank you for that, John. Karthik, do you share the same sentiments, Karthik?
More or less similar sentiments to what John has said. What we've been noticing, especially in this space, is unlike in a lot of other business spaces where we see businessmen or people who come in from an entrepreneurial mindset, come in with startup idea. In a business like esports and gaming primarily, it's a completely unique ecosystem. At one end, you have large established gaming organizations like Electronic Arts or Tencent. And at the other end, you have nerds or geeks, as I call them, who have been through the gaming cycle for last 3 4 years and have come up with the gaming ideas and gaming algorithms. So they come in with a very raw game plan. They come in with a very raw understanding of the game and a vision of where they want to take the game purely from a game point of view. So if you expect them to come in with a business plan, or if you expect them to come in with a revenue plan, or if you expect them to come in with what are the other layers of franchising or of partnerships or of ancillary revenues coming through advertising, I think we're expecting a little too much, because we're talking about a creative ecosystem where we are trying to differentiate a game, and a gamer primarily, or a developer would primarily put all his efforts into differentiating his game, creating complexities, bringing in the tech angle, and building in scale. So the evaluation axis moves a little bit. As an investor, our role is not only our role is not primarily just about pumping in the dollars and evaluating the performance, but also about adopting the entire startup, augmenting the startup with the layers in terms of how do we, if we like the idea and if we see a promise in terms of its scalability, which is primarily how unique the idea is, how solid and how evolved the platform that they are working on is, and do they have a vision? Because the industry requires a 4 5 year or maybe at least a 3 to 4 year vision in terms of developmental cycle and engagement with the shopper or engagement with the player. If they have that, then it's our responsibility to help them build the rest of the layers. And that is where we see a difference in terms of investment patterns coming in. More often than not, the guys might not even understand the quantum of investment that they require. Most of the startup aspirants, especially in this space, only come up with an understanding of how much money they require to develop the game in terms of a software code. They would not even understand the money required to even commercialize the game or to market the game and make it scalable and available. And hence, we need to pump in all these layers and make it a thriving organization and then take it to the world. So it's a very shared, joint effort, joint risk, joint investment, and joint success if the business becomes.
Right.
That's the way I look at it.
Francis, how about your side, Francis? Can you talk to us a bit about the progressive projects that you see and some of the patterns and trends that you kind of see with the industry?
Sure, I think I agree with John. In this case, where I'm seeing a lot of investors being very risk averse, especially in investments. They don't really want risk, and they want something that is sort of guaranteed in a sense when they invest. On the other hand, I also see Karthik's point of view where it's also about developers putting things together, especially here where I come from within Southeast Asia. There's a lot of geeks out there that just put up games together, and there's no marketing knowledge and or anything around it, that they end up going into game publishers and having them to market their product, and they just get very small amounts at the end, having all the margins taken care of by the publishers. So I think it's still in the early stages, I would say, in Southeast Asia. We're still at the point where we're still developing companies, but still very early infancy. In-app purchases are still low, so we're still. But I think what's great is that we're one of the countries here that are being outsourced for a lot of the work for all these top game titles. And if these guys suddenly one day turn around and want to create a company, they could actually build really good games. It's just a matter of
building the team, as Karthik said, just making sure there's a balance on all sides and being able to market as well a game. But so far I've been seeing a lot of companies now getting investments, but very small amounts. We're talking about 200K, but those are just seed rounds that they're being able to raise, but nothing beyond that.
Okay. Sergey, over at your end, do you see any different? Sorry, you're muted there, Sergey.
Sorry, I thought I clicked it. Yeah, well, my recommendation for the startups would be as follows. For example, John mentioned the need for revenues and the right business model. The thing is that VCs are not expecting from you to be extra profitable. The VCs need revenues there just to show that your business model is working. So they need to see that there are actually some people that using your product, they're actually, that the numbers are right. So they want to see how much you're paying to get your customers, for example, right? What's your price per customer? How much you're paying to get them use your product? How much they're spending? Because it's the math behind your business model. If it's working right, then it's a scalable thing. We all understand as VCs that it's not just the project won't be able to scale up by itself because they need money to scale up. But we need these revenues to see if your model is working. So when some startup founders approach me and say, why, VC is obsessed with revenues because they're supposed to, invest in growth and in the future, and we can't show the revenues, because you don't need to. I mean, I'm speaking about early stages, because if it's a Series A, then it's something else. But we need to see that your model is actually working, that the math behind your model is working. I recently, just about a week ago, published an article on E27 called Busting 5 Exit Myths on Startup. Check it, because there was one myth that also concerns fundraising as well. You need to pay attention to your accounting, for example. That's what we're looking at. The accounting itself, by accounting, I mean the proper cash flows that look at, you couldn't believe how many startup investments are finally turned down when we say, okay, that's an interesting thing, let's explore. Then we give the papers to our financial experts and they check, and that the financials are a mess. There are two things that could deter, investors from your company, even if you have a great team, very good idea. First thing, if your cap table is messed up, and let's say they say they have a great early stage companies, and I actually met the companies like this in Singapore, in Thailand, in Germany, when they say we're looking for early stage investments and we already gave out 30% of equity. And well, how early stage it is, I mean, no investor want to jump into this if you're already given up 30% of your equity. Their cap table may be messed up. They say they own 100%, but then turns out they get the money from aunt or from uncle, and these uncle kind of want to own these 20% of equity, but it's not signed up. So it's all messed up. And sometimes, as for the accounting, sometimes even the private expenses may be messed up with their private financials may be messed up with their startup expenses. So it's really, when it's really hard for you to understand, do they really have this revenue they are claiming to have? Because we all understand there are ways to do the fraud revenue, right? They may be pouring money and they may be exiting them. So when financial experts look at this, and if they are not happy, they may say, no, we're blocking the deal. So that's not happening. And another thing I wanted to say for the startup founders is actually Don't think inside just your country unless you're in US. Even Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, Germany, they all try to think outside of their country. The market is not big enough to show. I mean, it's big enough for you to be profitable, but it's not big enough to get the valuation that the investors want. Most of the investors looking for potential $100 million valuation and think that the market need to be big enough, right? So the market need to be at least $1 billion. So that's what we're talking for startups in Southeast Asia. Think outside of your country. For example, Thailand is not big enough because usually, I mean, if you think okay, if you think just pure numbers and you think, okay, Thailand, 68 million people, if I'm not mistaken, but the most of your customers probably will be concentrated in Bangkok or some of the rural areas, and then you've cut it off most of the population. So you're just left with, let's say, 10 million people. It could be said, same could be said about Philippines, same could be said about Indonesia. Very fragmented, actually, markets, because even in Indonesia, people speak different languages in different areas of the country. And so these are the things that the startup founders forget. They need to expand. And if I tell you about Southeast Asia, all of the startup founder, all the VCs tell you, try first at the major cities, Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta, Manila, and then probably expand further. Right. So yeah, that would be my recommendations.
Yeah. Kind of makes sense that you target the metropolitan areas first and kind of just look at that adoption itself. You're right there as well. And again, as you know, that LATOKEN itself, we are focused on the digital assets of things, and we're looking lots on the digital exchange and looking at businesses within that ecosystem as well. Now, when it comes to the whole industry and the topic that we are on now, do you see many, let's say, startups at this point, or even mature companies, are they adopting blockchain or blockchain tech into some of the games or some of their businesses? Yeah. Could we start with John again, I suppose? Do you see a lot?
Yeah, in fact, I was mentioning about this last time. Actually, the blockchain technology and also Bitcoin exchange market, that kind of thing is hardly regulated by the government at this time, because we are talking about the security, and also it has characteristics of the betting and gambling. So Korean people are very conservative about it. So biggest coin exchange market, they are looking for the foreign investment to expand the business to the overseas, because they are thinking it's not working in Korea anymore. And so the game companies are adapting the blockchain system and release the game, but it is not huge success this time. I think it's just matter of time that all the people will be playing it, but it's not activated in South Korea. That's true, and this is the thing that I have to telling you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that input, John. Karthik, over at your side, do you see lots of blockchain adoption or blockchain-based tech?
While I believe that a lot of blockchain-based tech might enable a lot of participation and trading of rarer in-game assets, I primarily haven't seen a lot of adoption coming in, especially in the Middle Eastern development or Middle Eastern gaming industry. But a couple of them in India, especially a game trading platform where it was primarily about gamification and participation, was looking at it. But I have an NDA, so I can't disclose the partner. But that is the only one that I've seen coming in. But otherwise, I primarily believe that there is a huge future, especially with Southeast Asia coming in. But otherwise, it's very limited in this part of the world.
Okay. Francis, over at your side, I mean, since we're on the topic.
Sure. So I think on the blockchain side, about 2 years ago, it was a huge down here. With all the ICO craze and all that, that movement. However, I think after that whole ICO movement died down, everyone kind of steered clear of blockchain, crypto, or anything along those lines. There are a few that remain. Those that were able to raise their ICO successfully were able to then go on and be able to secure licenses. However, I think the regulations have caught up as well on the blockchain side, and there are requirements down here now that you got to register certain things before you're able to launch something along those lines as well.
Right. So are companies avoiding it at the moment, you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies that are avoiding it. For one, hiring blockchain developers are expensive. It's not the cheapest one. And two, I think they're starting to have issues on use cases. Like, if you centralize something versus decentralizing it, sometimes it just doesn't make sense, right? Just because you want to put blockchain into it, it doesn't mean that it's a blockchain. Blockchain is essential, right? So there's quite a few companies that have steered clear of it. Very few are remaining. But there is still companies around that are doing blockchain stuff here.
Right. Fair point there, Francis. Sergey, over at your side, do you see any interesting use cases?
Well, probably my position will be, my viewpoint would be kind of unusual. I think the blockchain is itself is just a step to a next technology. I think it's a basis. It's a perfect basis, but what Kartik, John, and Francis said, the word itself already tainted by the ICOs and you cannot change the public's perception. So every time when I speak with fellow VCs, when they hear and please remember, as VCs we manage someone else's money, right? So when you speak with your LPs, limited partners that actually invested in your fund, when you say the word blockchain, they all think only two things: Bitcoin and trading. So, and you cannot basically change this. You cannot change this mindset. So if they think trading and you give them something that is not about trading and is not about Bitcoin, they're kind of puzzled why we need to be doing this. So I think the blockchain itself, the companies that have successful examples of implementing blockchain, they're actually naturally moving to a next step. So that I think they'll soon be named something else than blockchain, but using the blockchain technology as a foundation. I think, and that's I think the only way to get the proper funding at the later stages, because let's be clear, we don't see any use cases outside of crypto and trading. There are very, very interesting projects out there, but they all serve some kind of a puzzle element for the bigger picture. So until they name this bigger picture and say that's what it is, until they remove the word blockchain, because actually no one is concerned what's your buildings made of. You cannot say that we're making buildings made of concrete, well, we're making concrete buildings, right? So no one basically interested. Well, if it's a selling point, even you can say you build houses made out of wood. Well, if it's some kind of unique wood, probably, but why are you so persistent, on the word wood? Is it something? Yeah. So it's just a foundation. So that's what I'm interested in. That's what I'm, trying to inspire other founders in the blockchain industry. Put the bigger picture. Leave the technology aside. Don't care what it was built upon, as long as it's working, unless it's something unique. So that's my point.
Thanks for that, Sergey. And again, I think for those tuning in as well, this is VCTV by LATOKEN. Now, VCTV is a platform where you can actually come in, pitch your idea, speak to our investors, and really get that first-hand look into your business and also into the industry itself. So do reach us whenever you feel or whenever you want to. All the links are below, and also land on our page to get more information on all the investors that you see on the show today as well. So, gentlemen of the panel, again, we are at the tail end of our show. We have a few minutes left. I think it's only fair that we kind of end the show by talking directly to the business owners, to the startups that are looking at you for advice. What would you suggest their focus be? And how would you suggest they drive the growth of their business, I think, within the whole realm of the topic today? John, perhaps you can kind of sum it up for us here.
All right. Before making the statement, I would like to ask all of you: are you guys okay from Corona? Because I'm wearing this mask because government has strictly recommended us to put this at anywhere, outside or inside too. The best thing is stuck in house and don't go anything, but we have to work. That's why I'm wearing the mask. So I would like to tell you, if there is any kind of startups like a digital, healthcare, bio, I don't care. If there is some good company can solve this problem, please let me know. And
Yeah,
yeah,
we're looking for that solution as well.
yes, please. I would like to happy to meet the kind of the company at the VCTV and LATOKEN.
All right, thank you, John. I think the entire globe is kind of looking for that as well. You're not alone, John. So Karthik, over at your end then, I mean, what would the focus be? I mean, what would you tell those inspiring entrepreneurs looking at you today?
I think still the idea rules the roost. Originality of the idea, conviction behind the idea, passion to see a business happen. Because in the past, dollars were a limiting factor in terms of seeing your idea turn into a reality. Today, there's a lot of dollars sitting on the sidelines. As long as you have an original idea, as long as you're able to show a conviction and a passion to turn that idea into a reality, and more importantly, you have a roadmap to convert that idea into a reality. There are a lot of people who are willing to join hands with you. All that it requires is to come up with something that is scalable, wholesome, and more importantly, absolutely differentiated. We have seen in last few years, especially in this part of the world, businesses that shouldn't have existed or couldn't have existed or we would never have thought would have existed are getting funded to the tune of 50 to 70 million dirham in a region like Middle East, where fuel is one of the most cheap or one of the cheapest elements. There are four different home delivery fuel organizations or fuel network ecosystems working in this part of the world, and even they got the funding. So everybody else would get the funding. It's about originality.
Great point. I mean, you're right. I say some are lacking and some are just simply copying. Francis, on your side, could you tell us or help some of the businesses look at that focus point? What is that focus point?
Sure. So I mean, for most of the advices, I agree with the John Karthik and Sergey. And on my end, my advice would be on to do with validating the idea first. Making sure that if you were to pitch to an investor, make sure you've done your homework, you've done the numbers, making sure that your business model is sound. You have traction to prove what you've done so far is working. It's great if you can have paid customers. It's very important to show that people are actually willing to pay you rather than you trying to get them for free. And most importantly, at that point, you have a very good plan to execute this whole thing, being capital efficient and making sure that you're able to maximize the capital raise for the operations. So I think those are the key things.
Right. Thank you for that, Francis. You're right. Having that grand plan and making sure that it's able to execute, I think that's the key as well. Sergey, kind of moving on to you, and could you help us summarize the show? Give us a little bit on some of your thoughts and insights again.
Yeah, sure. My advice in this case would be, I just just in the last month, I've judged four very big startup competitions: health tech battle for Europe, health tech and fintech battle for North America, and the unicorn finals of the unicorn battle. And what I've seen for the startups that won, my recommendation would be think about if you put your problem right. If there is a real problem that you're solving, because what I've seen, about 90% of all startups fail because, you know, at the very early stage, because there is no real problem that they are solving. It's fake. I mean, fake because they might think that people need this, but where they actually got this idea that the people really needing this, right? So first thing is the problem should be real. And you should be able to show us that this problem really exists. You should convince me. And convince, you know, the second thing, your idea of your project should be formulated in one simple sentence. There was a moment in the judging panel when I explicitly asked, you know, startup founder, can you explain me in one sentence what is your company about? And he replied me with 5 sentences. So basically that means he cannot understand what his company is about. And the third thing actually would be your solution need to be really scalable. I mean, people always put this some, you know, geo expansion just for the sake of things, just to, you know, please the investors. But sometimes it may sound, we're going to expand to Germany and actually to Mexico and to Japan. First of all, there's 3 different languages and they're completely different mentalities, and no way you could expand in just these 3 different language speaking countries with completely different mentalities. And, you know, it seems out of place and irrelevant because there's, you know, this, so that your solution need to be scalable. You need to have a clear expansion strategy plan, how you're going to expand this. And when I mean your solution need to be scalable, it need, if your solution, let's say, very heavily content language dependent, and you just spend a lot of money on, you know, localization, or, you know, there are some things that very specific to your country and it cannot be easily scalable, think twice and make it more scalable. So that would be my recommendations.
Great advice, and thank you for that, Sergey. I think for those of you viewing in, again, now these are words of wisdoms almost, and these are real life scenarios that we are trying to summarize in each of these shows for you. Again, do reach out. Our VCs are available to listen to you, of course, through the right channels. So again, click like, subscribe, and tune in again for all our next shows. Again, those on the panel, thank you for your time and insights. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.